The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, TechBytes is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
Welcome back to another episode of the TechBytes podcast, powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and this week, I'm really excited to have an Asia-Pacific conversation with Christopher Thomas Moore, CTM to some, Christopher to some, but here today, it is in fact going to be Chris. Very indecisive guest today. Can't tell me what his name is, so we're going to go with Chris. But before I get started, let me just go ahead and just give you a little background of how this conversation came to be. So many of you know, and you should know this, that the IFBTA has a partnership with the National Retail Federation. In fact, for 4 years, we've had a food service technology zone at the NRF's big show in New York every January. But this year, we did something special. We had a food service innovation zone in a room of our own where all this technology really came to life. And the whole conversation was, how do you bridge that gap between retailers and food service? And is there a place for both? And actually, Domino's, who our guest is with today, did play a role there. And Chris has spoken at NRF before. But some of that is going to be the conversation because really, first of all, welcome. But the real question is, and great presentation this morning.
Thank you.
But I want to know what your perspective is. Let's not say you're a pizza guy, but you're a food service guy. So why would food service be at a retail show? Is food service retail? Because, by the way, you did sort of say that on the stage. Mm-hmm. So is food service retail, and where do you see the crossover between retail and food service?
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you again for having me. Super excited to be here today. And, there's definitely a bleed over between the two. Food service now is so dependent on e-commerce, be it through third parties like aggregators, be it through own sites. I think the pandemic highlighted for our industry the importance of building direct relationships with our customers and building e-commerce experiences for them to be able to purchase our products, right? And so the same e-commerce technologies that are applicable for the retail category are also applicable for food services. And so I think that it's a complete relevant overlay between the two, where we're leveraging a lot of the same technologies, the same methodologies, the same approaches to messaging to activate our customer bases.
Okay, so I didn't really do a proper introduction here. So that's a great lead-in because we talk about e-commerce and the tie between the two, and that's because of your background. But you are the Chief Digital Officer of Domino's Pizza.
Yep.
Okay. And in that, it's interesting because I always have this thought, and by the way, you were asked this today, so I feel like this is your second interview today. But I always have this thought of who actually runs IT today. Is it the digital person, which may be in marketing? Is it the CIO, the CTO? Is it a CDO? Chief Digital Officer, right?
Yeah.
CDO. Okay. So I'm never exactly sure because I've seen other companies like Inspire, go through a chief digital officer and they may or may not have had a CTO or CIO. So First of all, how do you see that fit within both the retail, the hospitality, food service environment today as far as your role?
Yeah, and I can highlight the structure that we have at Domino's, where I do feel like it's a good structure that works. So my organization under the Digital Innovation Group sits under our global marketing umbrella. So my lateral peers are our Chief Brand Officer and our Chief Analytics and Insights Officer. Our CTO, who leads our technology organization, which is one of the biggest organizations in our brand, is not in that global marketing organization. And the relationship between the two of us is that, my organization kind of oversees the products and we manage the roadmaps, the strategy, the alignment to the business. And our technology team really helps enable those goals and kind of our focus areas. But there are so many other aspects of technology outside of the things that are consumer facing or team member facing, from infrastructure, hosting, and all those other things that help bring everything to life. So the role of a CTO is very complex and layered.
Are you trying to say that the CTO has a direct connection internally as well as externally?
Well, I'm saying that the CTO has a very layered role, right? And the one layer is helping enable the objectives of the
Oh, sure,
business.
they're picking the technologies, right?
Well, not all of them are being picked by the technology team. My team also supports, especially when you talk about the MarTech stack. What are we using for an ESP? What are we using for a CDP? How's our data mart working, right? But there are definitely other areas that my team has no involvement in.
So does the chief digital officer have something to do with the messaging internally as well as externally? Because obviously you have connected staff, you have connected franchisees, licensees around the world, you have suppliers and people. Is digital like all the way across the board?
It is. So my team both manages the experiences from a consumer standpoint as well as from a store team member standpoint. So all of our technologies in store, from our point of sale to all the different screens that both the customers and our team members see on a day-to-day basis, my team is responsible for those products and managing the roadmaps and the visions for where those go, and also on all the consumer elements, so like e-com, loyalty, and all those things like that.
Right. So, as I think about that, you have a rather interesting job. And as I was listening to the presentation this morning, there were a couple of key points you made. And I thought that was rather interesting as it relates to marketing and digital. So you were talking about having the voice of the customer, that you were really listening to what the customer, and actually the brand I'm trying to think about what your mother might have said here, right? Because I used to work for Marriott, and when I left Marriott, my mother said Marriott was never the same, yet she never understood what I did for a living because I was in tech. And I'm thinking about this. Is there a correlation to when you've been, 6 years?
6 years.
Is there a correlation to that and when the messaging changed because Domino's did this major messaging thing because they had an issue that, with customer perception and things, and you guys, first of all, took it, on the chin for some things and came right out. I remember that.
Yeah.
But I think that sort of coincides with when you came in.
No, that was actually before me, but it was the catalyst that really changed a lot for our brand. We call it internally our turnaround story. It was really when the brand made a really drastic pivot. It actually correlates with the CMO at the time, Russell Weiner, who's now our CEO, coming on board and really taking it on the chin, like you said, and acknowledging the fact that we could do better and our product wasn't meeting the expectations of our customers. And I think it highlighted to us the importance of listening to our customers and how impactful it is when not only we listen, but we act based off of their needs. And so we changed the, entire makeup.
So your mother's not crediting you with turning around the
No, no, she's not.
I just want to make sure that we have this right. So,
I don't think so.
But I will be very clear that a number of the things that have happened under your watch, because if I do account to some of the years and things and the messaging that was out there and how you delivered digitally. So this wasn't necessarily a marketing thing, by the way, because when I think of chief digital officer, I don't necessarily, there's a CMO, right? So there's a marketing officer.
Brand officer.
Okay, a brand officer, right. Well, those are two different things because, in fact, you are responsible for the delivery. That's an interesting thing to say. Right?
Pun intended.
I visited there one time and they had to run in the halls when they had the box to deliver the pizzas to people because in those days they had the 30-minute guarantee, which of course that might have, anyway, we'll move on from that. But as I think about that, you have to figure out how you are going to get that message out there so you are really arm in arm with both the messaging and the operations. And you're saying that the brand people are responsible then for the messaging.
Correct.
Within there.
Yeah.
So that's a real challenge. Now, it's also probably a challenge for the technology and the tools that you use, which may or may not be readily available. You would think they'd be readily available globally, but they may not be readily accessible by customers globally.
Well, first off, I'd say that I think one of the magic recipes, pun intended, for our brand is the organizational structure. Whereas, my peers and, peer organizations under our global marketing umbrella, the brand team, our analytics and insights team, we all have a shared agenda. We are working off of the same objectives, the same goals. And as a result, we kind of pair up and work on all of the different activities of a brand together. So, our brand team leads the tonality, voice of the brand, our advertising efforts, our social efforts. My team leads a lot of our retention efforts. So all of our own media, SMS, push and email. But, we work together to bring those to life. So there's not like one part of our business that is like just running independently. In order for us to be successful, we need to have a good story from our advertising. We need to be able to execute and do delivery of digital, which is our most prevalent channel. And then we need our analytics and insights to understand what's happening.
Well, actually, more than any other segment within the food service, hospitality, or retail. Well, maybe I could argue in hospitality because of central reservation systems. It's okay. Maybe I argue that, but or loyalty. But loyalty in your channel is also, obviously very connected because, and also guest service. And I don't think that people realize that. I can't even remember the year, but many years ago when I owned FS Tech and I was running it, we gave out an award one year for digital innovation in the industry. Now, the interesting thing is we couldn't choose. We gave it to all three of the major pizza brands at one time. Okay. At one time. Because I find that pizza is probably the hardest thing in technology, and all of these POS companies or online ordering companies that think that they're just going to go ahead and do pizza have another thing coming because of the various ways. And by the way, your messaging actually confused the problem over the last few years when you told people they could go ahead and order anything they want on pizza. I can only imagine because the software is supposed to do quadrants, and then you have this and that. And then, by the way, you got to go ahead and couple that with, the promotions, that are out there, get 2 toppings this, but wait a minute, can you do them by quarter? So you guys are clearly
very complex.
Well, yeah, it is. And so that digital offering also has to be complex. And then you couple on top of it all the technologies that layer on from the consumer side, because at the end, unlike any other industry, you have more ordering going on by the consumer.
Well, I think that's why you find, especially for the national players in the pizza category, that most of us have built our own point of sale internally. And because of the complexity of pizza, it's just not something you buy off the shelf, right? Especially when, we have so many variations, ways that you can make a pizza, half and half pizzas, you can be totally different on one side of the pizza than the other. There are millions of ways.
Like the top and the bottom of the pizza?
Well, like left and right.
Oh, okay. Because I don't know. I mean, I could picture, look, the pizzas are coming out today where they've got the dough on the outside. I don't know. What do we call this, right? So who knows what it's going to be, right?
You don't know, right? But you need something flexible to address the future, right? Because who knows what our next product might be. And, an off the shelf point of sale doesn't necessarily enable that all the time. So I
spend a lot of time talking to people about technology within all three industries. And most of the time, I will tell you that I tell them, let's not start off the conversation with what you need custom, because most of the time you find out what they need custom is only because they want to look at the stuff the way they always looked at it. And so it never comes out in that way. So, and we'll get in the data, but they don't want to accept that. So they want to do custom. Well, clearly you cannot lead in the pizza industry and be global, by the way, because we should talk about that. I mean, you guys, I was very good friends with the owner of Domino's Pizza in Japan, who sold it, a guy named Ernie Hika, who sold it a while back. And I do know Jack Cowan in Australia, who's I guess he's like 8 countries or something, right? And by the way, I think he has his own call center. I think he developed some of his own technology. That's sort of a conversation itself. But when you're the digital piece and you have to deliver that message, and people expect to be able to get consistent service, loyalty, those orders worldwide, that's a big challenge.
Yeah. I mean, it is. And, luckily for our brand, we have a point of sale that has been globally adopted, and it provides us, the ability to have consistency and a structure that helps support a standardized organizational or operational structure. And so I think that that's one of the biggest, wins for our brand over the history was whoever had the idea, long ago that let's have a common system that we're using. I know that across the industry, not just in the pizza category, but a singular point of sale is a new concept for a lot of brands, right?
Well, they can do that today because they have the cloud-based point of sale, and because you have language translation that can be layered on top of it. instantly, and by the way, I mean, it's funny because you get these deja vu moments, and I think about conversational ordering, which was a subject of maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, conversational ordering today
Voice.
actually means something totally different. By the way, okay, great. So voice.
Yeah.
Voice AI and pizza are going hand in hand. As a matter of fact, some of the call centers, that is some of the new technology that you guys are actually leading the way, and then other groups are adopting it, especially like in the drive-through or something like that. So, but you guys are actually leading that.
So yeah, I mean, we at Domino specifically, we launched a partnership with Microsoft last year to build an innovation hub to really understand what the future of this world of generative AI means for our brand and probably broader, the restaurant industry. And so we're working on really understanding both the experience in store as well as for our consumer experience, what does the future look like, right? And what does that mean for us? And we're really excited about where we're going, but there's going to be a lot of learnings, right? Like we're still very much early in this space of generative, and, there's a lot of promises of what it could be. I think we need to test and understand what that means for our brand specifically. And so that's what we're, on this journey with Microsoft to do.
Well, certainly, and we're going to take a break, and then we're going to actually talk about some of the new technologies and things that are out there. But before we do that, when we talk about generative and we talk about AI and we talk about voice in here, you guys have licensees, franchisees, you have people around the world. I find that it is easier not to actually keep throwing that out there, but to go ahead and use as a tool behind the scenes, because at the end of the day, customers and stakeholders seem to be very concerned, about using these tools. Yeah. But really what we're talking about is giving better customer service, and things like call centers. Yeah. Are one of those big areas.
One of the things that I've talked about before was I think that AI in general, and AI is such a big spectrum, right? It's everything from machine learning to generative. But in that, I think the promise and the opportunity is for improved relevancy and accuracy in the conversations that we're having with our customers every day. I view personalization more about a relationship, right? And just like any relationship that you have with anyone, the more context that you have of that person, you address them differently, you talk to them differently, your actions with them are a little different, right? And so how could we leverage all of this great, technology to help improve that so that we have more relevant messages, so that, we have messages that really mean something to customers versus just mass throwing and hoping something sticks, right? And so I'm excited to see if that promise can be realized. But again, I think that we're still early in the stage of testing and learning, not just our brand, but across the board, to really understand what the future of this looks like. But I think that the promise of personalization was the buzzword before AI, right? And now I think that the realization of personalization is more of an option now based off of these large language models.
We're going to take a break for a moment, but boy, see, that's the problem with the conversation, because personalization. Why don't we talk about the words big data, one-to-one marketing? Why don't we talk about rules-based systems even before we got into machine learning? Yeah. Right? I guess if you're around for a while, you might know some of these things. But none of this is new.
No.
I mean, in conversational ordering is not new. It's just a different type. And you see a lot of things that started and failed, and maybe because they were before their time. But if you're able to dig them up.
Yes. And like the topic of that is like voice, right? To your point. I think because of I remember back in 2015, the conversation was voice. Voice is the future. Voice is moving at a higher adoption rate than every other technology in the past. And so we're all thinking what does this mean for search? What does this mean for the consumer experience? And I think because of the fact that overall, there was not a delivery of a great experience to voice, that the adoption just plateaued.
Right. And so that's why it just has to be behind.
And so now the question is, now with the advancement of this technology, can we bring precision, bring a better experience? But what is going to have to happen to change the perception of the consumer for them to try it out, for them to be interested in it? Because I think we've all had the experience of, using a bot and just, give me an operator, please. Assistant. Give me somebody else to talk to. And so that's what we all have in our brain. And so now that there is an option for better experience, how do we start to build that and realize that in our consumer experience?
Well, let's leave that question open, and then we'll come back and we'll start in that discussion.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
Well, welcome back. And I'm here with Christopher Thomas Moore, Chris, and of Domino's, and we are having a conversation on technology at NRF-Asia, the inaugural show in Singapore. And it's an interesting. You know why it's so interesting? Because sometimes it's hard to sit down with people, but you always catch when they're outside the U.S. Okay, so we'll see what happens when we're both back in town on the other side of the Great Ocean. But we were having a discussion before the break about some of the things in the conversations. We were talking about voice and how it may have been before its time, and we were talking about adoption and why it may be adopted now. What I find is, and I think this is to the points that you made in your keynote this morning, is that the consumer leads the way. And so what I do, and you probably do the same thing, actually it'd be sort of fun to do this with you sometime, but to go to CES and walk CES. Now, I find it fascinating because I usually do a program every year called A Tale of Two Cities, which is I go to CES in Vegas, and 1 or 2 weeks later, I go to New York at the big show. And so what I'm looking for is the speed of time between technology at CES, or what do I see that's new there, and how long it takes to show up at the big show, because that's a big technology show. So I look at those things that are there, and so but the reason why I do CES is because my theory is, except for when you go into some of the small booths in the new innovation area, is that when a technology comes out there, it's about to be commercial, and when it goes commercial, it's probably going to be adopted by the consumer. And so when you look at things like kiosks, or you look at voice ordering or online ordering, I don't even worry about the voice being a problem today, because so much of that technology there is voice. And by the way, I did look at your vehicle that you had up on the stage today. It wasn't on stage, but it was on the video from 2016. And
or DXP.
I thought that was very good. However, I go, whoever thought there'd be a whole building at CES for autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles, EV, right?
Yeah.
But the interchangeable modules that sit on top of them. No drones this year, by the way, which I found interesting. But I went to Food on Demand and sat next to Grubhub. And, of course, the only thing they could talk about, an Israeli company, is delivering pizza by drone, because I don't think they've figured out anything else yet. But it's going to come. So anyway, I go to CES. We digress here. But we go to CES I try to do it to get where I think the consumer is going to go, even if it isn't necessarily for the most fun. Is identifying the technologies there that I think are going to end up in our industry. And I talk to the inventors who never thought about it.
Yeah.
So do you go every year to CES?
We don't go every year as a brand. We used to go, but
okay, as a brand, do you go every year?
I don't go every year. I did go this year though. This year I did the same thing. I did the CES, and then I did the big show right after, and it was a compare and contrast. But for me, I think CES is interesting because I feel like some of the concepts at CES are a few years out, right? And so the question is, can you get ahead of some of these concepts by going to CES and seeing like what's in the next frontier, what's kind of coming. And I think Big Show shows a lot more practical applications of technology.
Well, that was the point of the Food Service Innovation Zone, but not for you, but for the retailers who didn't understand they could put food service in.
Yeah.
Including the pizza bot that was there. And the whole idea there was to say, you know what? You can make fresh pizzas. Have you ever gone to NACS, the convenience store industry show?
No.
Oh, you ought to go. You ought to go.
Okay.
Because there's only 4 things you see there. By the way, it's a huge show. Okay, here are the 4 things. Pizza, chicken, beef jerky, Red Bull. I think there's a 5th. I'm missing one. Let's see. Chicken, pizza, beef jerky, and what do you buy? Oh, hot dogs on rollers. I don't know how I forgot it. Amazing show. I took Susan Newman in the NRF. She went with me just to see it because we just want to see. But you know what? The biggest opportunity for the food service industry is the partnership with the C-stores, because with EV vehicles, they have to change what they're doing. Now, there are Domino's in C-stores today I think I've seen some of them in there, a few.
Yeah, like
But-
connected to them. Yeah.
But but we're going to see more of that. And then when you have things like automated pizza making of fresh pizzas, you don't necessarily have a labor issue. Plus, you can be 24 hours a day. I'm going to guess you guys are in that market.
Well, I'd say that for us, I think it comes down to the end of the day, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, was that we have to make sure that we're delivering the best product to our customers at the end of the day, right? And so a hot and delicious pizza is what's most important. Now, can we find ways to bring efficiencies in the process of making that pizza? Absolutely. Is full automation something that I personally view is like going to be the future for our brand? I don't, because I think that there is so much about the human interaction that goes into the making of our pizza that is an important part of our brand. And
Okay, so hold on a minute. So, well, two things. First of all, I've learned that never is a long time.
yeah,
Okay, so eventually,
maybe.
probably, well, 3D printing a pizza. I mean, who knows if they get it right. I never thought.
I mean, Back in the Future, they popped it in the microwave as a little dot, and it blew.
How about the Jetsons?
Yeah, there you go.
So anyway,
all of it could happen. Absolutely,
anything can happen.
Anything
So
could
let's
happen.
just
I
accept that.
agree that.
There are also, when you talk about the consumer and acceptance of things like voice and AI, I just sit there and I go, well, why don't we talk about food? Who ever thought that there was going to be a Impossible Whopper that would taste like a Whopper made with beef? Who thought?
Yeah.
Right. And now we have genetically engineered beef, which actually is technically allowed to be called beef because it's got the same gene pool in it. Right. Okay. So it's a long time. So, but you said something I've never heard before, which is so when people say that technology is going to replace us or they're concerned about it, I say there's a couple things you can't replace. One is empathy, and creativity, and we need that. That's what makes the hospitality industry special. Well, you just said about you need to have the personal touch in making the pizzas. Now, I don't necessarily get that because I also know the pizza companies are taking a look at using surveillance cameras that are there for normal surveillance to make sure that they're following standards and quality. Did they get the number of pepperonis right? Are they placed? So can you explain a little bit more what the personal touch is in a pizza that is coming from Domino's?
Yeah, I mean, we do make our pizzas by hand, and so like the ingredients are placed by hand. There is a quality evaluation that's happening, of that pizza to make sure that it's meeting our standards. And absolutely, I think, in the future, there are areas that can be automated. There are efficiencies that can be gained through technology. But I think that the human element of a brand, is very hard to just completely leave that all to technology. I think that the human interaction with our customers, I think that those are important qualities and parts of the brand, right? There is an experience of that driver coming to your door, the driver that you see all the time and delivering that pizza, that helps build that connection with the brand, right? And so I just feel like...
And your digital ecosystem goes not in the traditional just point of sale in the call center, but it has to go all the way to the driver to the door.
Top to
the
bottom,
customer,
from the inception of the order,
Which is why you came up with the
delivery.
timers and stuff, because you're connecting the guest in the process.
So I think with our tracker, exactly,
Absolutely.
so that you understand the experience. And so like, I just feel like, I think that there is a push globally across not just in our, just in our industry to, leverage technology to automate and find efficiencies. And that's good. That's good for all of us. But I also think it's important that we also maintain the human aspects of our business. And I think that that's important as you build relationships with our customers, that piece is intangible. And I question if it can be fully replicated.
So how do you do so I get the human aspect. I a lot of times refer to culture, right? Now, culture is two things. Culture is your company's voice and culture, or what made you guys different, which is why this messaging over the last 6-8 years is really, defining that, right? Culture is, how you're approached, but culture is also where you live, the culture. And so how do you, in your role, how do you find the right digital avenues in order to meet the culture of both the people who are on the one side that you're saying is part of the personalization and what makes you special, and you need that human touch.
Yeah.
But on the other side, how do you tie that together digitally?
Well, I think it's about finding where you place your bets, right? There are areas where you can automate, you can bring about efficiencies that have, little impact to the overall experience of our customers. And what that provides you is the ability to redeploy that, cognitive load somewhere else where it can have great value, right? And so that's the balancing act, right? Is to find where those areas are, where those lanes could be, that don't have that negative.
But you have global in your, well, it's not officially in your title, but you have global in your responsibility. So how do you take what you just said and then multiply that either by region or by country?
It's not easy. It's really complex. And it's something that, we are, really focused on as an organization is the global application of, thoughts, innovations, and ideas in the brand, and how can we bring those to life as a global brand.
So behind the scenes, is technology helping you in that globalization?
I think it absolutely is. Again, I think one of the best things that we have is a global point of sale that, the majority of our markets are on. And so that definitely does help, right? And being able to execute innovations that can impact the whole globe. But, I think that there are nuances regionally that you have to kind of learn, and it takes partnership with our global markets to really understand where those opportunities might exist. We also are trying to share with each other the knowledge that we have, right? What have you tested in your market?
But that's where technology comes in. You can do that a lot quicker today.
You absolutely can.
Because, of how it's placed.
Lift and shift some of those things.
Very good. So, I'd be remiss in not actually recognizing the fact that this is not your first time in, I'll say, the global hospitality industry. You started in the hotel industry.
I did.
Right, in extended stay, I think it was, right?
Yeah, extended stay.
Okay, so now, of course, we know that that's in the limited service area. But is there some correlation, because you and I had a conversation of having attended in the past the technology shows in the hotel industry.
Yeah.
I know it was a while ago, but, do you see some correlation between them, or do you see things that can be learned from one industry to the next that you either brought with you, or you think you wish, because I assume you stay in hotels, that you wish that you could, push back out of your learning today?
There are a lot of correlations, and it actually all goes back to the first question that you asked in the sense of the overlap between the food service industry and the retail industry, and the same is there with travel as another vertical that has a lot of relevancy and overlay. When I was in travel, I came from being on the agency side and really more retail, right? And learned a lot.
You started your career in a call center somewhere, right?
I did start in a call center, exactly. Yep.
Because we're not going to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But we could talk about what happens to the call center in the future.
I did.
So keep going.
I have a lot of thought on that, but
that could be another session. Okay,
tune in to episode 2. As I was in travel, I saw how travel's tactics, the tools, the advertising vehicles were growing, but they were replicating what was happening on the retail side. They were just off a little bit, right? There was a little bit of a delay. And as I came over to the food category, saw the same thing, right? And so like in the travel side, we had these things called travel aggregators, the Booking.coms, Expedias for a very long time. And then coming into the food category.
Who were, by the way, taking away the brand's voice, because they were telling people, come to us, and the brand isn't important. Just tell us how many stars, how much you want to pay, and where you want to go, and we'll pick for you. So the challenge then for the operator was that once they've got the head in the bed, you now have this period of time to convince them to be loyal to the brand.
And what happened in the industry was then the brands realized, holy crap, I don't own my customer anymore. And there was a push to book direct, right?
You don't own your voice.
All of the big brands were like, book direct on my website.
Absolutely.
You get loyalty, you get all these other benefits, right? And so there was a pullback from the brands to take ownership.
Did you take that experience into what you're in your role in Domino?
I mean, I think it definitely was very relevant, coming into Domino's. And I think the importance of continuing to grow our first-party e-commerce platforms, build direct relationships with our customers were really important. We just launched our partnership with Uber, and, now is a good time for that. But when I first started, that it was a different environment in the space. And so, I think that there is a ton of overlap between these different verticals, a lot of similarities that exist, but there are some nuances. But I think we can learn a lot by looking at what's coming in different categories and how that might be the future of what's going to impact us. Right.
And I think getting different groups together, by the way, that are not competing. I've always thought, by the way, of taking a walk, an invited walk at CES, but bring together some hotel people, retail people, restaurant people, maybe healthcare in there. Travel would be different because you get the airlines and the travel. And, because all of a sudden you'd be sharing experiences where people don't have the backgrounds like you have, that may have come from those different places. And by the way, I'd point out, when I went to Food on Demand this year, they had the keynote speaker was the founder of Uber. And what is he doing right now? He's investing in ordering companies and delivery in the food business, right? So
it's and that's why I think events like the big show in New York or the one here in APAC are really interesting, because you see the combination of all those different verticals colliding, right? And so you have the opportunity to see what's happening in retail. You see what's happening in food service, like the innovation hub that was.
I could have asked you, by the way, I could have said, okay, so what have you learned in retail? Because you've got a foot in both camps. You've sat on the digital council, and obviously the NRF very well. But what have you observed, perhaps that food service companies, traditional, quick service, fast casual, whatever, should be adopting from retail? I know what the retail should get from food service, which is why there was a food service innovation zone. But there are lessons to be learned across the board. But a lot of times people don't talk.
Yeah, and we have to. And that's the beauty of a program organization like the NRF, because it's representative of a lot of different verticals. And we have the ability to learn from each other.
I find that very interesting. It's a federation. They really do cut across the board, where every vertical, at least in North America, has its own little slice, from NACS and convenience stores to FMI to grocery.
Exactly. And I sit on their digital advisory council, and I learned so much from some of the peers in that council who are in different categories, right? And what are you working on? What's important to you? And it's so interesting that we're all fighting the same fight. We're all focused on the same things, but we might just be doing them in a little different way, or we might be.
But the sharing of the ideas helps. So just to sort of wrap up, I do want to recognize, because you've made reference to this, and we are sitting here in Singapore at this first conference. Have you been, so I know you've been busy this morning, and I'm keeping you busy right now, but have you actually been on the floor yet?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so in going to the floor, was there an expectation you had before you got here of some things you might be seeing, or something you thought you wanted to see that maybe you wouldn't see in other geographies around the world? Or are there some things that you sort of wish were on besides the food service innovations, that you wish were on the floor here?
It was great to see on the floor the innovation hub, to see, some of these brands that are really kind of pushing the edge from a technology standpoint. I was really questioning what would be nuanced here, right? Would it be the same brands that I see at, the big show in New York, or will there be more regional players that I've never interacted or been exposed to? And, I was happy to see a little bit of both, right? You have a little bit of everything down there. And so I think that that's great, right? Because it's providing exposure to some of these, programs and platforms and brands that I don't get to see
on a day-to-day basis. But it's so easy for some of these companies to also expand globally now today with some of the technologies, especially, the innovation hub itself has changed even at NRF in the last few years.
Definitely.
From this year to last year there, I found it very interesting that the number of hardware-bound companies reduced completely, and they were all software companies, which makes it much easier to go. But so I can see that there would be an awful lot of conversation that we can have, and that there actually could be. Well, there could be a number of
3-hour show.
First of all, I know what's going to happen here, because if I keep are you staying for the whole show?
Yeah, I'm staying for most of it.
Okay,
yeah.
That's I'm going to run into you somewhere here.
Yes,
and we're going to continue just for the hell of it.
Right.
I'm sort of curious of what things. But before we get on, so one of the things that you guys have introduced in the word personalization is really I mean, are we serious, right? You can pretty much put whatever you want, how you want to put it on, right?
A pizza?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Besides the emergency.
I mean,
I got that.
not everything, but-
Okay. All right. So I just am curious. You know, I go to the Starbucks website and all their executives up there, it says what their favorite drink is, right? So what is, I'm not going to ask you off menu what your favorite pizza is. How about this? If you could put together any pizza with any ingredient from around the world, which never's a long time, I think it's going to happen sooner or later, what would that pizza be?
Okay, so I'll say this, like, I'm very basic when it comes to my favorite pizza order, but what is really interesting as a global brand is that, you know, there are global food preferences. And so as you look at the Domino's brand globally, our menu in the United States is not the same menu that you have globally. As you go to India, very different menu. Japan, you can get tiger shrimp on a pizza. You know, like it's nuanced as you go across the globe based off of the preferences in the region and in the market. For me, I'm really basic. I like a sausage and pepper and onion pizza. I like it on a thin crust or a pan pizza, which is phenomenal. And so, like, really basic guy when it comes to.
Are you able to get that here in Singapore?
You know, I don't know yet. So I'm eating.
What was going? You said because
sausage, pepper, and onion.
Some countries where they're not having pork,
Yeah.
you're going to go ahead and have to deal with pseudo.
Yeah.
That's it.
So we have
Chicken sausage, right? So
we have an office here in Singapore. So I'm actually this afternoon meeting with the team, and I'm looking forward to doing store visits this week.
By the way, I would point out to your point that a lot of people have their development hubs for tech in the Asia Pacific region and Singapore as well. And so besides that technology hub downstairs, I also thought the Singapore area is rather interesting because what they're doing is they're fueling startups.
We did a retail tour yesterday that I was invited to, where we went to a few different retail hubs, a design center, and then we went to the Jewel at the airport and got a tour, and it's just phenomenal, you know, and to find out that this massive space that you think is completely full of just, you know, transit travelers, that over 70% of people that visit that location are actual residents. So, like, it's a residential hub just as much as freight travelers.
Look at airports, even in the U.S., like DFW. You look at some of these airports that have completely redone. And by the way, if COVID hadn't hit, they were looking at ways to bring in the local community because they really are great retail hubs. So listen, we could talk about all kinds of things. I can see that.
On and on.
This would be the start of many. But thank you for joining us here in Singapore.
Yes.
Places at NRF-Asia. So I really appreciate your coming on and having this conversation. I look forward to many more. So. This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFBTA is the industry's voice of technology within the food and beverage industries, no matter where they're found, including retail and hospitality, providing thought leadership as a single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities, connect with your peers, The Exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource and industry-wide professional education certification program. The bottom line, no matter where you live or where you're sitting at the time, is the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share as we're doing here today. So thank you for joining us on this episode of TechBytes, powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.